Hey everybody, welcome to the Texaco Camaro Show. This is episode 001. This is the kickoff show. We got a really good one. We got Mike Dusold, owner of Dusold Designs, big time attack guy, Pikes Peak Hill climb, Optima Ultimate Street Car champion 2 times, won many other races in Optima Ultimate Street Car. Now he's doing a lot of super lap battle, grid life, and all sorts of time attack and hill climb events across the country. We're going to talk about how he got into the business of being a shop owner from his childhood to where he is now. I think there's a lot of people out there that know who Mike Dusold is. They know a lot about him. I've known him for 20 plus years. He built the Texaco Camaro. But every time I sit down with him, every time I have a drink with him, we're at SEMA, wherever we are, PRI, I learn more about him. And so that's what really culminated this show, was not to talk about the Texaco Camaro, but to talk about all the people that we run into, the people that we race with, people that we have fun with, and just trying to figure out exactly, where they came from. Some are shop owners, some are just racers. This is going to be a really fun show. Wherever you stream us from, wherever you find us from, like us, subscribe to us, follow us. We want to keep making these. We want to keep, encapsulating what people have done with their motorsports careers, from the privateer, from the grassroots side, maybe even some professionals and experts in the industry. But without further ado, here's Mike Dusold. Well, Mike Dusold, welcome to the Texaco Camaro Show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, whenever I started looking at, doing something like this, you were the first one that came to mind about being on episode 001. And so here we are.
We're special.
It's very special. We're carving something new here. And, I had this idea of, trying to learn about the people that are behind the wheel that we see in the paddocks all the time. And we get to talk to people, but you don't get to really learn their full story. And so that's, I'm glad we were able to get this worked out. I know we rescheduled it one time and you're able to come in. So thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to be here.
Yeah.
It's cool to see what you're doing with this. This is definitely super neat. And, everybody watching doesn't get to see that we're underneath the Texaco Camaro. It's right there.
It's literally right there.
Which is cool. That's the inspiration and the muse while we're sitting here talking.
That's right.
Racecar is within reach.
A Racecar is within reach. This is the Texaco Camaro shop. So it's right there. It's right above us, 7 feet over. Well, before we get too far into stuff, I wanted to do a kind of a quick intro, kind of a street cred. Who is Mike Dusold, for those that may not know you, that may be watching? You're a 2-time Optima Ultimate Street Car champion, back-to-back, which doesn't happen quite often. It has happened before, but 2018, 2019 champion, Pikes Peak Hill climb competitor 3 times, and I'm sure you're going to keep doing more and more of those. Grid life, global time attack, SCCA time trials competitor, shop owner of Dusold Designs for over 25 years, and master PPG painter, artist, builder, fabricator, and what I would say is lover of all things that move.
Yeah, I think that would be pretty accurate. I like all kinds of different stuff: cars, bikes, motorcycles, planes. Had my fingers in all of them, and it's a lot of fun. Anything that you can blend engineering and art is stuff that I like.
Yeah, that's one of your big things, is that it's one of the taglines of your business is, where art meets speed. And, that's, a little bit about what I want to talk about today, is kind of where all that came from and how you progressed into where you are now. But before we do that, everybody on the show gets a gift. So I got a little gift here for you. Episode 001.
This is a very sparkly, shiny
gift. Any guesses? There you go.
This is actually a great gift for me because I always carry one of these, but I got mine too. Fantastic at losing them. I have found these things in the craziest spots. Like the last time I lost it, we were working on a Corvette, and we had like 4 of us, and we're all jamming on the Corvette, and I lost my flashlight and I couldn't find it. 2 days later, it's in a drain pan of oil. Thankfully, somebody found it. But you know what? It still works great. I love those things.
So thanks. Those Streamlight wedges are waterproof and
oil-proof too.
Oil-proof. Yeah, that's the reason why I thought that would be a great gift. That's a
fantastic gift.
I know you and a lot of guys in the shop. Basically, it's like an everyday carry that you carry in your pocket when you're looking at, just walking around your shop and you've got to get underneath a lift and it's dark underneath there and you just hit the light. The reason I knew you had one, and because you turned me onto it, and I have mine, but I actually I lost mine.
Yeah.
But then I found it. And then when you lose it, it's almost like losing your phone. You're like,
where's my light?
Where is that light? That's like the best light ever. Where is it? And so I bought another one. And so now I have one here at the shop, and I have one in my truck all the time. So vice versa.
Yeah, well, and you could have one charging while you keep one, and then when you lose it, you have one until you find it again. So, yeah, those things are great. And the older I get, the more I need it.
Yeah, that's true. You might pull that out at the restaurant, right? And just blow up the whole place with light.
I've done that multiple times because Pam is the same way when she has trouble reading stuff in the dark. So we'll be in like these dark restaurants, and just to be funny, I'll blow the whole place out with this bright light. It's fun.
Right. So for people who have never used one of those, they're bright, but then they have this feature that they go like ludicrous
like
bright.
The
turbo bright. I mean, it is insane how bright that is.
Yeah, they get extra bright. The funny thing is it's so bright that sometimes if we're looking at stuff that's like aluminum or reflective, it'll actually blind you. Like you can't even see it.
Yeah, you can't see. Yeah, I've noticed that. Sometimes I actually have to hold it behind my head to see something here, because it's like if you hold it here,
it's just too bright.
It is so bright.
Yeah, it's just blown out.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you like it. I figured, man, you can't have enough of those. So you got another one in the arsenal. I don't know. How many do you have now?
Well, I've bought like 3 or 4. I can only find one. So
now you got 2.
I've got 2. That's
keep that one in your car, and it's hard to lose it when it goes right back to that spot. The one that you carry around all the time, but that's...
it ends up being dropped. And some of the cars are tricky to get in and out of, and I think they fall out of my pocket and land in cars.
Yeah, well, cool. Well, I'm glad you like it. Again, glad you're here. But, basically what I want to get into today is really kind of talk about, who you are from the beginnings, as early as childhood and moving all the way through everything in between, all the way up until, where you are now. And I know that, there's a huge story in there on the front end because... when I talk to just any people that are car people, car guys, gals, whatever it may be, there's always some reason why they're in it, and sometimes it's real early on and sometimes it's later on, but, more times than not, I find it's kind of early on, that, something either in the family or just yourself or what you came across or saw on TV or whatever it may be, kind of launched you into like, this is really cool. This is interesting and something I want to get into. So let's just start from the beginning. Where'd you go?
Very beginning.
Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up outside of Chicago in a town called Lombard on the west side, and lived there till Pam and I got married, and then moved down to Texas after that.
Okay. So you're living in Lombard or outside of Chicago. What age did you start to come into focus? I mean, your family, from the background, you have a grandfather and a father that were kind of car people. I don't know if it goes back.
Yeah, my grandfather was a welder.
Okay.
So he was working in shipyards and stuff, like welding on submarines, and he was a fantastic welder. My dad has some stuff in the house that my grandpa did when he was an instructor of welding, and he would take like pieces of pipe and he would weld floral patterns and stuff on them where it looked like it was carved, but he actually did it with a stick welder. And he would just lay rod on it and make these 3D flowers that go up the side of a piece of pipe. So he was really creative and really good with welding. And after he got out of welding, he opened a body shop in like I want to say it was the 40s.
Oh, wow.
Is when he started the shop in Villa Park, Illinois, which is just a town over from where I grew up, and built the shop there. He ran it for quite a while and then left it with my uncle, and then my dad took it over after that. And I grew up going to the body shop as a kid, and as far back as when I was, a baby, my mom tells a story that she put me in my crib and went downstairs because she wanted me to take a nap, and then she came up like 2 hours later, and I had taken the crib apart, and I was laying on the floor, and the crib was in pieces all over the room, and she's like,
"Oh, wow.
What the hell?" So
what just happened here?
Yeah, how the hell did you take this apart? So then my dad would put me in the shop with a bucket of old tools, and my dad used to have this really cool line of engines, and he was a drag racer, so he had some of the coolest engines that anybody that's into Fords would ever want to see. He had a 427 Camaro, a Boss 429, Boss 302, and he had all those engines lined up, and then he'd have like old tow truck engines and stuff next to him, like big block Chevys and small block Chevys and stuff, and he would hand me this old bucket of tools and just tell me to go take the engine apart. And then he'd be working on an engine or whatever he was working on, and then I'd be, within eyesight of him with another engine and just tearing it apart. And that was when I was, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years old. I would be just working with tools, taking stuff apart. And I always loved it. And I guess it's in my DNA because I took my crib apart as a baby. But then I also really enjoyed art. So it's kind of
from
strange.
So you took your crib apart at like 2 or 3 or something?
Yeah.
And then they're like, okay, well, let's get him some like real tools and take something apart that
He's not just using his fingers and doing bad things.
And so taking apart like old engines with real tools, obviously it's probably not going to hurt them. They were there for a reason or out of the vehicle for a reason.
Yeah, I was like, say it's an old engine for a tow truck or something is what I think it was.
Right.
And he's like, yeah, I don't care about this engine, just take it apart. But I think I darn near got the heads off at like 4 years old.
Right.
My dad was like, how are you doing this?
He maybe just had to come in to give a couple extra Uggas to get some of the torque specs off of it.
I wasn't strong enough to get some of the, tighter bolts out.
Right.
But I was just taking stuff off.
So that's interesting because, at that early of an age, I mean, you're, 4 years old, 5 years old, you're already essentially in the industry per se, as far as, starting to learn, like, obviously your dad was drag racing and had a shop, your grandfather had a shop, and it was this, it was just a full family affair early on is kind of what it sounds like.
Yeah, it seems like I was kind of predisposed to it, but also had access.
Right.
And a dad that kind of encouraged me to do something that maybe I had an aptitude for.
Right.
It was kind of funny because when I was 9, we used to race dirt bikes a lot when I was a kid too. And I had a little KX80 and those things killed top ends. Like we would burn up top ends constantly in it. So my dad just showed me how to do it. And then I was like 8 or 9 years old doing top ends on my dirt bike.
Oh, wow.
Things like that. So it was, I think, never really being afraid to do it, wanting to do it, and then having a dad that was always really good at, well, this is how you do it. You got to do it, learning how to do the copper spray on the head gasket and stuff. And he taught me all that. But it got to the point where rebuilding all that stuff was easy. So then it just was kind of an expansion.
Right.
Once you get comfortable with a certain area of something mechanical, then that just is a foundation for the next level and the next level and the next level. Yeah, to where you can get it, perpetually more complicated. And it's just a bunch of different systems at the end of the day. So the better understanding you have of each of them, you just kind of expand.
So 9 years old, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, somewhere in there, you're like riding dirt bikes and doing all that. You're tearing motors down in a garage just to do it. But then you're actually like, I want to get on something that moves.
Yeah, I started riding dirt bikes when I was 4 as well.
Wow.
And then...
Did they wear helmets back then?
Yeah, I think there's pictures that my dad has.
Open face
He's
one?
like, yeah, but it's like this gigantic helmet, and we're these tiny little kids with this huge helmet on
Right,
our head. It looks
right.
like it's gonna break our neck off.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had helmets, but the funny thing is, one of my earliest memories of that is my dad had parents had a pretty big backyard, and he had this little mini bike that he stuck us on when we were like 4.
Yeah.
And my brother's really close in age to me. I think we're 14 months apart. And they stuck me on it, and I'm like riding it around. And then my brother wanted to get on it, so my dad sticks my brother on it, and he just goes WFO, and runs it right into the fence.
Oh my gosh. Like those videos you see on like YouTube
was
where it's
exactly like
it's
that.
okay. Just, it's your first time to get on. Just take it easy. And then they get on and it starts to go fast. And then they don't know how to, they don't realize that when you go like this and it pulls you, the G forces pull you back. Now you're full speed and right into like a tree line.
Oh yeah, he went, there's a rose bushes all along the fence
gosh.
line, and he just whack right into a rose of the fence.
Poor Dave.
And he was pissed. And fortunately,
Your dad was pissed.
No, my dad was more scared. Like he was running over there
sure
yelling
he's okay.
at him to, get. But
Right.
fortunately, he was okay.
Yeah. Well,
But it wasn't as glorious of a first experience for him as it was for me.
is your dad one of those guys that's like, as soon as you do something like that, like get back on it and let go again, or is like maybe that one you had to take a breather for?
Yeah, my dad's that way, but my mom was there too, and she just watched her kids
like,
splatter on the fence. So
Picks you up, takes you in, is like,
and he was a kid, right? He was like 3.5.
Right, if he's younger than you.
Yeah. So he was crying and freaking out, so she just kind of picked him up and carried him off. But my dad was definitely not the super sensitive dad, though, because if you hurt yourself, he's like, get back on.
Yeah.
Like one time when we were riding dirt bikes, there was this crazy ridge, and we were riding in a place called Ottawa, and it's all old mines and stuff.
So wow.
There was some dangerous areas, and there was this one hill that was really scary to me, that it was probably, I don't know, 20 foot high is all. It wasn't crazy, but it was really steep. And at the top, it was kind of like a dam that ran along a cliff. And my dad climbs up to the top and is like, you can do it. Come on, you can make it up. And I was freaked out that I wasn't going to be able to make it to the top of this hill. So I hauled ass at this thing. And I had my bike pinned, and I go up this hill at warp speed. And I jump the top of it.
Yeah.
And the other side, it's only like 8 feet across the top, and then it's like 100 feet down.
Oh my gosh.
So my dad like jumps his bike to crash me, to keep me from going down the cliff. And I remember being super pissed at him at first. And then when I got up, he's like, that's where you would have went, you idiot. It's like, why did you go so fast? And I'm like, well, I didn't think I was going to make it up the hill. But but my dad's like, well, shut up, get back on the bike, let's go.
That's right.
And we just went. And my dad is always really good guy. He's really pretty strict in some ways, but in other ways, he was always a bit of a rebel. So he was always into, let's go race cars, race bikes, do cool stuff. So it was really fun for us as kids because we just had a lot of exposure to a lot of really neat stuff that a lot of kids don't get.
Right.
And I don't think that I would be doing what I'm doing now had I not had all that experience as a kid, because a lot of the driving that I do now, I wouldn't be able to do it the way that I do it without the experience on the dirt bikes, because the dirt bikes teach you a lot of feel for what's the bike doing. Like, does the bike have yaw, and which end has grip, and all of those things. When you learn them at an extremely young age, it teaches you kind of muscle memory on how to react to what that feel is and what it does. You know, it's like any sport, right? If you learn the muscle memory really early, it's a lot easier for you to build on it later in life, because like if a car is going to get yaw or something, for me, it's not a conscious thought of how to correct that. It's something that has been baked in my brain for 45 years. So I don't think about it. I just do it so I can react really quickly.
Yeah, that's an interesting, point is, and that's kind of in the beginning I was talking about how, what people kind of started out with. And then when you talk about riding a dirt bike, I mean, that's the question that I would have is that feeling that movement. When you're riding a dirt bike, you're riding a 3-wheeler or a 4-wheeler or whatever it is, if you're not just putting around, you're going to feel movement if you're really taking it. And eventually you get, aggressive enough, and it sounds like you guys are out doing stuff, that you're going to take it to the edge. You're going to try to make it slide. You're going to try to make it do something. And like you're saying, it's part of that feel. It's like, oh, it twitched, and then you catch it real quick on a bike or whatever it is that you're riding. And that is, it starts to help you. Do you feel like you see a lot of people that are good drivers that they started out, or have you had conversations to where they probably were riding stuff like that? Or obviously go-karts you hear about a lot.
Most people that are good drivers later in life and have the instinct for it typically had something that correlated with driving earlier in life. So quick reflexes and able to think on your feet and understand vision, things like that seem to help immensely in stuff like driving. And some people just don't naturally have those skills at all. But fortunately for them, most of them don't really find it interesting to want to be good at driving anyway.
Right.
But the better drivers are typically people that have a few different, I guess, personality traits and some history that goes along with it. A lot of analytics go into driving as well, I would say. There's a lot of layers of complexity to it, and then being able to physically do things and adapt to different changes or situations all kind of play heavily into how well you're going to do as a driver. Because if you don't understand just basics like how to drive the line, say, or what the limit of grip is, then you can't go fast. You have to know, when am I reaching the limit of grip of my car, and then also know how do I move that limit, because the limit of grip in a car is like anything else. It's a variable. The limit of grip at that moment is the result of a few different factors. And a lot of people try to make it much more basic than that, where they try to say, oh, well, the limit of grip is just because that's the limit of this car in that corner. And that's not necessarily true.
Right. It's
the limit of that car in that corner, the way you approached it.
Yeah.
So
the way you put it there, yeah.
You can change that, so there's having that understanding, but then also being able to make corrections and do stuff so fast that if the car moves a foot, you've had the ability to process, what does that extra foot do to my ability to exit this corner fast? And one of the things that we did recently, just for fun, is figure out like how fast is the car moving, because for aerodynamic studies you need to know what the velocity of the car is to be able to calculate the air loads. So we were doing it on the Camaro at Road America, and we're like, well, how fast is it moving in meters per second at 200 miles an hour? And what was kind of shocking is that on the front straight at Road America, the Camaro was moving a football field a second.
Wow.
So you have to think, if you delay a second on your turn in, you just missed it by a football field.
Yeah, you're pretty far.
So then you go, well, if I need to get it within feet at that velocity, how much time do you have? It's microseconds that you have to time that perfectly to be able to get a turn in at that velocity or a brake zone at that velocity.
Yeah.
So the human brain's not capable of consciously making those decisions. Like, you have to do it subconsciously and with muscle memory. And the only way to do that is to kind of program it.
Yeah, so we'll dig deeper into that, because I definitely want to extrapolate what you're doing with the program, with the car, and all these other different aspects. You know, definitely, like you said, is, you know, there's a thing in professional sports where, you know, the game slows down. And I think, you know, the last person I heard say it, so I'll give him the credit, is Jimmy Day, saying if you're thinking, you're stinking. And you know, so that goes along with that point, and that goes back to that dirt bike riding. So you guys are out on these ridges, you're out there ripping it up. You never did any like competitive dirt bike stuff. It was just fun stuff.
Did some competitive dirt bike racing, never crazy level,
just kind of fun.
I had some friends that I was riding with that were semi-pro, and I got pretty good at it for a while, where we were doing some traveling racing and stuff like that. I never got really competitive, but I got good enough at it that I learned a lot of the basics at a really young age of how to do it well and what the difference is between people that do it well and don't. And I think that made tons and tons of improvement on what I was going to do later in life with the cars, because I definitely have more passion racing the cars than I did the bikes, but I have a little bit less risk. So on the bikes, it kind of got a little tricky for me because there's a lot more risk. And I always raced like cross country, stuff like that. And when we were going really fast, you know, there'd be like whoop sections between trees. And I got to the point for a while where you'd jump a whoop, turn the bars to fit between the trees, then land and keep going, so that you could go faster, because if you slow down and try and get through, it takes too long. But if you can find something to jump to where you can turn the bars, you can go faster.
Wow.
So, but I got hurt a few times in a row, and it kind of led me to go, I don't know that I want to do this and continually risk my body. And right before I got into racing cars, I kind of had gotten back into racing bikes, and I was chasing some pros in an enduro, and I was keeping up with them for quite a while. And then I got hurt pretty bad, where I was going around a corner and I didn't see a route, and it washed the front end out. But in dirt bikes, you got the bars and your legs out, and when the front end washed out, the bar went right into my thigh.
Oh, wow.
And it gave me a really bad thigh bruise, like really, really bad. And it was super hard for me to ride back to the truck. And then I had like 3 months where I had a heavy limp at the shop. And during that time, I really wanted to have a good focus on the shop and making the shop successful. And I truly feel like everybody that works at the shop relies on me to make sure that the shop's a good place for them to work and feed their families. And
right.
I started to feel like it was irresponsible of me to chase the dirt bike riding and risk that, not only for myself and my family, but all the other families that rely on me. And that's about the time I got into autocrossing and kind of started racing cars, because I felt, okay, well, the cars are around there to protect me. If I knock a fender off a car, you know, yeah, that stinks, but
put it back.
I could put a fender on the car.
Right.
You know, nobody's out of work because of that. I can't put a new leg on or something.
Probably create more work for yourself. But okay, so yes, you're riding dirt bikes, and then you're 9, 10. You start getting into middle school, high school. The first time you get exposed to like your own car, and your first car is
my first
high
car,
school, or is it earlier?
So my first car was my 67 Camaro that I actually sold and regretted it for a bunch of years. And then I have the coolest wife on the planet, and she went and found it and bought it back.
That's right.
But the guy screwed it up. But anyway, back to the high school days. So it was kind of a funny thing. My dad had a Shelby Mustang that I helped him restore as a kid. He still has it. And I wanted a Mustang. So I worked at the body shop, doing cleanup and porter stuff to make money. Got money saved up to go buy a Mustang, and we went to this car show, and I forget, my brother remembers the name of the car show still. I don't. And it was in Wisconsin. So we like drove up to Wisconsin, and they always have like the car for sale corral at the car shows. And at the end of the car show, we're walking around, and none of the Mustangs I could afford, but this dude had this red 67 Camaro there, and it was in my price range.
Oh, nice.
And I looked at it, and I was like, man, I really want this car. So my dad and I looked at it, bought the car, and I drove it all the way back to the shop in Illinois. From
How far is that drive?
It was probably an hour and a half.
Pretty good
like
drive
that.
when
So
you
it was a
first
pretty
get in.
good drive, yeah. And I was like just 16.
Oh, wow.
So
What'd you have to pay for it? What'd you
I
get
paid
for it?
$3,700.
Those were the days.
But it's funny because it's really hilarious. I fixed that car up really, really nice. And then when I got arthritis, I couldn't really drive it anymore. So I sold it. And I think I sold it in like 2003 or something for like 18 grand.
Wow.
But the guy screwed it all up, and then I was able to buy it back for like 7 grand.
Oh, nice.
So I've never paid a lot of money for that car. I didn't really
So you're winning
get a lot.
on that purchase.
I feel like
to
I'm
some
losing
extent.
in an extent that all the work I did is kind of
Yeah.
got to be redone. But it's cool because I've got a really neat idea for what I want to do with that car going forward.
But that was your first car. You pulled it out of some car show.
Yeah.
Price was right. You drive it home. Then what? So that's 16. So 16 through high school, you're just kind of tweaking on it. And
Yeah, we used to drag race that thing once a week.
So that's what it was
at
set up
Union
for?
Grove. Yeah, back in that day, it was a drag car, and I had a goal of I wanted to have the fastest car of anybody in high schools in Chicago. And I think, according to the only drag strip anybody went there, which is Union Grove, nobody beat me. I had the fastest car.
wow.
But in 90, it was probably, 91, 2, had a car that was a street car, 4-speed Camaro that ran 1180s in the quarter.
Wow.
So it was pretty fast. It had a set of old Winston Cup heads on it, and 13.5-to-1 pistons and a giant roller cam in a 4-speed. So it was not your normal high school kid car.
Yeah,
it
I'd
didn't
say
get
not.
beat by garbage trucks
Jeeps.
or Jeeps. Yours was Jeeps.
I got beat by a Jeep. Yeah, you remember? Yeah. Yeah. I think it was, I'm hoping it was a souped up Jeep.
Yeah, it was
When there's
a
a Regal.
Jeep with a supercharger.
Yeah.
that could be
411 gears or something.
Yeah, it was something hot.
Yeah. So red 67 Camaro, known as the Mighty Mouse. Did that happen in high school or later? Or
Yeah, because I was into custom painting. So the way I funded that car is kind of funny. My dad wanted to encourage my artwork because they felt like I was talented with that, and they wanted me to go that way. So my dad had bought me like airbrushes, and because they had the body shop, there's a lot of leftover paint and stuff there.
Oh, yeah.
So he would give me all the paint I wanted and airbrushes, and because I was always into art, I just played with it and learned how to do custom painting just by doing it. I started custom painting Harleys and stuff when I think I was like 11 or 12.
Wow.
And my dad's buddies, by the time I made it to high school, would pay me to paint their Harleys. And
At 12 and 14-ish?
yeah,
Oh, wow.
but back then I was charging them like $500, and I'd paint their Harley.
Price was right.
And I would do like one a week at night in high school. And
It's just laying like one color down? or-
no, I did like flames and
Okay, you're
airbrushing
doing
and
like
stuff like that.
Yeah, the stuff you see on the cool tanks.
Yeah, it was nowhere near as nice because I was a kid doing it.
Right. It
so
wasn't
it's
the
not
later
like,
innings, Mike.
Yeah, I didn't just go like
$500
Hey, I know what-
just cut my teeth, Mike.
Yeah, it was like, you get what you pay for. I was painting like dirt bike helmets and Harleys and all that. But, when you're a kid, you don't have any expenses. So all that money just got shoveled into Camaro, which was fun. But that was kind of what taught me to work on the car and figure out what do I need to go faster. And at the same time, I'm funding it by painting. So even way back then, the same me was me. It's just now I have more complicated stuff during the day and night.
Right.
You know, I got bored with the basic stuff. Now everything's just more complicated so that I can make it hard on myself.
When did you know you were into the art thing? Like, you know, because
I've always been into art. Like my mom's friends used to kind of freak out about it because she had a lot of friends that were kind of creative people and artistic. And my mom always kind of had that vibe. And her friends were always like, you have to encourage him. He has so much talent. You know, I remember them saying that. So my parents always were like, you got to just do art. But they didn't push me at all. It was just encouragement, right? Like,
gave you the supplies.
You do well on this. If I wanted supplies or had an idea, you know, they would just encourage me and challenge me. And I think that was an inspiration for me, even going forward as a parent, that I've tried to be that way with my kids. Is it's like, I don't want to push them. I just want to encourage them and challenge them. And I think that was the blessing that I received as a kid, was that upbringing was perfect to allow me to be creative and pick my own path and enjoy the stuff that I enjoyed. Because if I had a parent that, you know, pigeonholed me and said, oh, you're talented at art, you need to just focus on that and don't do this other stuff with mechanical things, then I wouldn't have had the exposure that I did, and I wouldn't be who I am today, which I think is what I'm the most proud of, is that I'm not one-dimensional that way. Like, I'm not somebody that only looks at things from an engineering mindset or an art mindset. I'm somebody that does both, which is unusual. There's not very many people that are comfortable in both aspects.
Yeah, that is a unique flavor that you have, and it shows through in the builds that you do, and just the diversity and the dynamics in which you can go a different route. And, you know, and even with the discussions that we had early on, you know, with my car, it's, and I know you have those with all of the customers that come in, is, you know, that are looking for these kind of full builds and what the direction to go is. It's, you know, it's tough for people to, you know, envision things. And then some people can envision them, but you got to fabricate it and make it happen. Right. And so, you know, that's what I'm starting to see here as you're talking, is, you know, from an early age, you know, you're getting the mechanical side to some extent. You're at least, you know, messing with tools, you're messing with dirt bikes, you're building your own stuff, you're doing drawings and whatever else you're doing at an early age. You're painting people's bikes for money at, you know, before, you know, I don't know what.
Before I could drive. My mom used to have to drive me to the shop because I was actually doing production paint work at the body shop before I could drive.
Right.
Like my mom would pick me up from school and then take me to the shop, and I would work at the shop until like 8 or 9 at night. And then they'd pick me up and take me home because I couldn't even drive yet.
Shop was far away a little bit, or, you know, far enough.
The shop's probably 20, 30 minutes from my high school when we were growing up.
But it gets cold up there, so you can't be walking back and forth.
No, you wouldn't want to walk that. Like, that'd be hours and hours.
That'd be hours.
I used to ride my bike during the summer to the shop from the house, and it was like an hour bike ride.
Oh my gosh.
Like yeah, it was pretty far.
Yeah.
But it was pretty wild because, you know, you kind of learn all that drive and working on stuff. And one of the other
work ethic too, right?
Well, my dad kind of got me early with that. When I was first getting into doing my Camaro and wanting to race it, he told me one day, he's like, you're not going to be the fastest car around because there's always going to be somebody that's willing to spend all their time and money doing that, and you're not going to want to do that. And I was kind of like, screw that, nobody's going to outwork me. You know, that was an early...
That's the reverse psychology of dads.
Yeah, my dad just got me. And I was like, no, I won't be outworked. And I feel like that was something that I tried to carry forward in everything that I do, as far as the shop or our race program or anything, is, you know, if somebody beats me because they're just better than me, I'm okay with that. But I don't want anyone to ever outwork me. You know, I will try as hard or harder than anybody. And if I set it as a goal, I'm putting 100% into it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those mentalities of like, someone that beats you or someone that does something, they did it. They're a human person, right? So I can, do that. And
it should be inspiration.
Yeah.
Like if you're fully functional, if someone beats you, you should be inspired to find out why.
Right.
And try to figure out what are they doing better than me and what can I learn from this? And that's how I choose to look at it. But there's definitely people that don't look at it that way.
Right. Right. They may see it as, that's not the way that they want to live their life, but everybody's different, and, but as a kid at 14, painting and making money, were you like the kid that had money, or were there other friends of yours that had money?
No, I had more money than any of my friends did, but they weren't working, they were just being kids.
I mean, if you get $20 for a birthday or something, you're like, just hit the payload and you're making $500,000 or whatever a week or whatever it may be. That's interesting.
Yeah. I had way more money than all my friends did, but I didn't spend it on anything other than cars.
In the Mighty Mouse.
And I did buy a dirt bike. I had a really nice 91 Husky 125, brand new. That was probably one of my favorite dirt bikes I've ever had. But I had that in my Camaro, but I worked my butt off at a young age to do it. And it was kind of cool because it taught me, how do you achieve things that you want at a young age. And my dad always told me, he was like, you want that, make it a goal. Figure out how much money you need. Figure out how you're going to earn that money. Do it.
Yeah.
Make it happen. And I think that that's another thing that as a parent, I thought was a great life lesson that I've tried to teach my kids is it's like, we're not just going to hand you stuff. You have to learn how to set goals and achieve them. And it's really important to get that early so that you
make some mistakes.
Well, yeah, and also take the responsibility of it. Like, hey, I want this. I can achieve it. All I have to do is figure out what are the steps. Take step 1, step 2, step 3. Achieve what you want to do. Yeah. And nothing's out of reach. If you can dream it, you can achieve it. You just have to look at the steps.
Yeah. It's one of those things like people say, and it translates over to motorsports and even being a business owner, people trying to climb Mount Everest. It's like, you can't just show up and be like, I did the cardio and I read all the books and YouTubes and I'm going to go climb Mount Everest. Like,
there's a bunch of those people dead up at the top of near the top of Mount Everest.
You got to climb some smaller stuff first.
Yeah. You got to learn where you're going to screw up.
Yeah. You got to make the mistakes. And I think that's, where, we'll talk about it a little later on, but a lot of people, you have to make those mistakes. You can't just go in. And I think sometimes the mindset is, I want to do as much as I can to not make the mistakes. You have to do both. You have to know as much as you can. You got to make the mistakes, and then that's how you learn. But so we jumped off on the artistic stuff because we were talking about the Camaro and how Mighty Mouse came to be. How did that come? Is that like a graphic that you had?
Yeah. So I was doing the custom paint.
Yeah.
And I had this thing back then that it was a small block car because I was racing a bunch of people that had big blocks. So because I've always been a little sarcastic and like digging at people,
right?
I decided that, the small block was always called the mouse motor back then. They called it the rat and the mouse for the big block and the small block. And a lot of the big block guys, would do rats and stuff on their car. And I thought, I'm going to put the Mighty Mouse on there because this little small block beats up on big blocks all the time. So I kind of created this little cartoon of Mighty Mouse with drag slicks for legs with like smoke coming off of it. And I painted it on the back of the car. And I probably painted that on there when I was maybe like 17 years old. And I still have that spoiler now. Like when
you rebought it.
Yeah. And it's still on there. Like the Mighty Mouse is still on there.
Yeah,
so it's pretty cool.
That's cool.
But what's funny is the car always had the license plate was always real HP when I was in high school. So all my friends actually called the car real HP, not Mighty Mouse. But after we got the car back, it's Mighty Mouse.
Back in those days, it was before hashtags and,
Yeah, shoot, that was before pagers, man. That was way back. Like, I remember I was super high tech when I first started dating Pam at like 18, and I got a pager. I thought, now,
what color was your pager?
It was like the teal green, like the translucent.
I had that.
Did you?
Same one, like the green see-through, whatever.
Yeah, and it would like when it would light up, the whole thing would glow.
That's funny. I was going to say, that's why I asked it, because I was like, I remember having a green one, and I was like, this is cool. And now looking back on it, I'm like, what was that?
Yeah, it was funny.
Could have just gone with a straight black one or something.
Did you have the little weird codes that you'd text each other? Like,
Yeah, people were better at it than me, but
yeah, Pam had all these codes that she would.
yeah, you could say like hello and other sorts of other words and stuff.
Yeah,
it
well,
was
then
interesting.
she had like this one instead of I love you, she would do 831 because it's like 8 letters, 3 words, 1 meaning or something.
Oh, okay. So
she had all the
little
cutesy girly stuff.
right. I was trying to think back, like what did I use a pager for? I guess they page you your number and be like, that was your cue to call them.
Yeah.
So then you got to go find a phone and
was
actually
like-
put like 25 cents or 50 cents in. Right?
So it was the early version of a text that says "call me."
Yeah. It's like, okay, here we go.
All right, now I got to find a phone.
And I got to have some change.
Do I have a quarter?
Yeah. Those were the days. I think there could be some people watching this that are like, what are you guys talking about right now?
Unless they're our age, and
Yeah.
then they're like, "Oh, you just got to be in a Fox Body Mustang," and then it's high school.
Right. So high school, you got the 67 Camaro, you're doing this. So it sounds like you and Pam met and probably 18, 17, 18.
I was just out of high school.
Just out of high school.
And at a
Yeah.
New Year's party for one of my friends, and she actually went there to see him. And then he ends up with some other girl upstairs, and she's kind of upset and drinking extra, and her and I are playing poker with my brother in the basement.
Oh, wow.
And we just hit it off and got to be really good friends. And
Yeah.
we were friends for months before we even started dating.
Yeah.
And then the rest is history because we've been together.
Yeah. For those that don't know, Pam is basically, the shop mom for Dusold Designs, and you guys have been together for so long. But how did you get to Dallas from Chicago?
Pam's fault.
It's Pam's fault.
Yeah. So Pam worked at a company with her dad in Aurora, which is about an hour outside of Chicago.
Okay.
And that company was going to relocate. They were closing down the Aurora plant, and they were going to allow people to go to Dallas or Pennsylvania. So back in those days, Dallas to me was like flat desert, and there was nothing here.
Tarantulas and scorpions.
Yeah, so I didn't think that we'd ever want to go to Dallas, but it was a free trip. So we're like, well, it's a free trip, and I don't remember what time of year it was. It was either late fall or early spring because it was really cold in Chicago. And we came down here, and I'm like, wow, there's trees, and it looks like a normal place, but it's warm, and there's no snow and salt, and I could drive my car almost all year. Like, sign me up. So her company ended up moving us. Oh, the other thing was the housing costs. Because up there, at that point, like a starter house was like $300,000. And we bought our first house in Dallas for $95,000. So we're like, oh, wow, the weather's better. We can buy a house now. And why not? Because her whole family was moving down. So we just pulled the trigger and made the move and came down here.
Yeah, so that was easier. So for her to move, the whole family's moving, she's moving, you're kind of, I guess you're still working at the shop and doing some odds and ends, or you just graduated high school trying to figure things
I was
out?
working at the shop as a painter, and honestly, I was supposed to take over the shop.
Right.
Like I was the next in line to run the shop, but I really didn't have love for fixing soccer mom cars and stuff, and cars that people don't really care about. And just at that business to me was very much just like turning a crank.
Right.
It was not.
That was like pure bodywork paint. Like somebody gets in a wreck, they come in, they get it freshened up.
And businesses like that are difficult for me to get passionate about. I'm not just passionate about making money. That's not what drives me. Some people it is. They're like, hey, I want to be in business and make my business thrive, and it's all about making money and having a successful business. But that wasn't me. I don't do the shop that we have now because I think it's a great way to make a buck. I would do that stuff for free if I had to because I just like to do it. But like I did when I was a kid, I found a way to make it where that's what I can focus on and that's all that I do. And the body shop would have taken me away from a lot of the stuff that I wanted to do on a daily basis. It wouldn't have allowed me to
be artistic.
Yeah, to be artistic all the time, because there's a big difference between something being your hobby and something that you're fully immersed in. Like, you're going to be more successful at something if you can immerse yourself in it completely. So I wanted to kind of get myself to the point where I could be completely immersed in what I wanted to do to allow me to be as good at it as I possibly could, so that all of my time can be devoted to making myself better at that. And creating the shop is kind of what did that. You know, it started off with paint because that was something that I knew that I could do in my garage in Texas.
So now you're in outside of Dallas or north of Dallas?
Yeah, we were in Louisville.
So you're here now, and you're like, you know, Pam's working, so that helps with, you know, expenses and what have you. You know, it wasn't like, you know, what do we do here to make money? But then you have all these skills, and you say, what, create something out of my garage is kind of where it started.
So I started off working in a body shop, and then ended up working in a fab shop as a welder. And all the while I was kind of trying to build up my thing on the side. You know, it started as a side hustle.
Side gigs.
Yeah. So I kind of got my garage where I could paint motorcycles in it, because that was always like a way for me to make money back in the day when I was a kid. So I just kind of leaned back on that and started doing, you know, painting Harleys in the garage. And I got in with a few different motorcycle dealers around town where I'd, you know, go around and recruit work and get them to, you know, try me out and let me do paint work for them. So I got kind of a business together where it kind of got inconvenient to have to go to work, because I had enough business on the side.
The side gig was going.
Yeah, the side gig, it kind of kicked off. So eventually I started just focusing on that. And it was a big leap for Pam and I remember having to sit down in the kitchen and tell her, you know, hey, I really want to do this. I want to make this my full-time job. And, you know, we had Alyssa, who was really young at that point. We didn't even have Brianna yet. And Pam's focus as a mom is she wants to kind of watch out for the family and
safety, security.
She wants another kid, and she wants all this to happen with the family life. And she kind of felt like what I was telling her is kind of pulling against that. You know, she thought that it was one or the other.
Like, yeah.
And I kind of had the conversation where I guaranteed her at that point, like, I guarantee you I'll bring home this much money a week, no matter what I have to do to take care of the family. And then if I do that, are you cool? And she said, yeah, okay. As long as you can guarantee me that, we're okay. And that was probably 96 or 97, and I haven't done anything since. And
so that's the inflection point for Dusold Designs. That's the
conversation at the kitchen table where it's like, hey, I guarantee you I'll give you $500 a week. Now she demands more than that.
And I bet, yeah.
I can't get away with $500 a week.
Not $500 a week. Yeah, that's a very interesting story, because, you know, it's, yeah, I'm sure you'll never forget. You both will never forget that point because of where the business has gone now. It's like that really was. It could have gone different directions. I mean, you may have gotten there eventually, but, you know, that was definitely, you know, a launching period, and especially for the growth that's happened in, you know, the North Texas area and things like that on creating a shop. And
yeah, it was a perfect area to happen into, right? Like for us to end up in Dallas, which is one of the fastest growing markets in the country, was just a lucky chance. It's just great for us that that's what happened, because it's allowed our business to be successful, because we have such a great potential client base here. It's amazing. Although I say that, and at this point we have people from all over the country with projects in the shop. So
yeah,
you know, we don't necessarily pull all of our business from the area, but it certainly was helpful for a really long time that we were in a growing metroplex area like this.
So you're in the garage in 96, 97, or So
the current shop started in 98.
98.
So we've been there since.
You did a year or two kind of site.
Yeah, and we had another little spot that my dad was actually working with me at that point, and we had like another little spot, and my dad would do some fab stuff and things like that, and then I did the paint stuff, still in the garage because the other shop wasn't big enough.
Because you started out more in the paint side, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really started out in the paint side because it was easier for me to get that going. And we were painting, I was getting better and better and better at custom paint work and really trying to push myself to get as good as possible at painting. And we started doing more and more higher level bikes, like show bikes and everything. And we were painting for Rick Fairless at Easy Riders and Biker's Dream, a bunch of different bike shops. And we started looking at the fab work that these bike builders were doing. And me being me, I'm like, well, we could totally do that. And like, I've got all these ideas for ways to sculpt bikes and make all that happen. So then I started doing the fab work. Well, then I had the fab and the paint, and it's like, well, I need to put this stuff together. I'm not afraid to put stuff together. So, well, let's put it together too. So it just kind of started with paint, went to fab, then went to doing all of it. And then the bikes are kind of what really had another crossroad for me. So for a while with the custom bike building, I tried to build more and more and more radical stuff. And we did this TV show called The Metric Revolution, where we were sponsored by Triumph. And we did this Triumph rocket bike. And I visually made this crazy looking bike. And I was super happy with it visually, but it rode awful. I couldn't stand how it rode, and I had some technical deficiencies in it that bothered me a lot. Like the bike was functional and it rode, but I knew that was my weakness. I was like, I can make it look really cool and I can build it, and it's like a piece of sculpture, but it doesn't function the way that I want it to function. And that's kind of where I started to drive myself into the racing part of things, because I wanted to be able to do all of it. I didn't want it to be, to me, it felt hollow that it wasn't functional like it should be. So now what drives me is I want to have those same visuals, but also have something that can compete as well as it performs anywhere, right? So
right.
When we build a car like my current race car, or the new Evil Twin car or something,
right,
I want that car to look like, holy cow, that's like a SEMA show car. That thing is cool. But the car is also fast. Like, it's as fast as a race car. It just looks like art. And I think that makes it so much more fun. And it makes it something that is on a completely different level than a lot of the custom car builds that you see they're very pretty and they look cool and they get a lot of attention at, a Good Guys show or an Autorama show or something like that. But they're not very functional.
Right.
They don't do anything particularly well. So that just makes it more complicated, right, and more of a challenge and more fun for me to try and say, hey, I wanted to do all of those things.
Yeah. So let's take a quick break, because I want to talk more about the shop and how that grew. And then really at the same time, the divergence, not really a divergence, but in parallel to your motorsports and your racing, and then how that kind of blossomed off. So when we come back, we'll talk more about that.
All right.
We do get asked by people, what is your main business? What do you do? What's your core? And actually, I sat down with Ryan and threw a couple ideas at him, and we ended up coming up with where art meets speed. And I think that's probably the closest we've ever been today to defining Dusold Designs. We're not trying to do the everyday cookie cutter, crank them out kind of things, as much as we're trying to do stuff that's never been done before, or something that's just interesting and different. We still have a lot of ideas to go as far as the race car meets show car theme. We've got a few different projects we're working on now that are really, really crazy, that are going to push the envelope. And I think that the cool part about Dusold Designs is that it's ambiguous by intent.
Hey guys, I wanted to jump in here during the break. Just remind you to go and subscribe and like and follow us on whatever streaming platform you're coming in on. And without further ado, we're going to jump back into the episode. Welcome back from break. We were talking about how you were painting the Triumph and how kind of that form and fashion wasn't really translating as well to rideability and comfort and, kind of the next evolution of what might be happening at the Dusold Designs shop. Talk a little bit about, what you were kind of emphasizing there on, just not, it just didn't feel right. It looked good, but, how do I make this to where I want to ride it and have fun with it, not just look at it?
Yeah, that was about the same time that I ended up going to a Good Guys show and saw people autocrossing, and it looked like a hoot. And I had a 69 Camaro at that time that I'd kind of bought to build as like a flip car that I was just fixing up, and thought, you know what, I'm going to take it out there and autocross it. And I just got hooked. So I started looking at all the wild builds that were there. I think Rob McGregor's truck was there, or maybe that was the next year or something. And there were some pretty wild builds at that point, and they kind of got my creative juices flowing, and I was having fun in the competition side with the autocross, and seeing the cool builds I found inspiring. So I took that first 69 Camaro. It was just like...
So you had a 69 Camaro?
Oh yeah, I had a gray one.
That was your first
autocross was
entry.
In a 69 Camaro. Yeah, it was in... And it was
stock chassis?
Oh yeah, it had leaf springs. It was lowered.
Drum brakes?
It had drum rear,
disc
front, but the stock disc fronts. And it had a turbo 350 and a 350. It had a little small block with a thumper cam in it. It was a cool looking car.
I knew you loved 69 Camaros. I just know.
Oh, I really do love 69 Camaros. I like all first.
That's interesting. Camaros. I don't think a lot of people know that you started with a 69 Camaro as kind of your first autocross entry.
So Chad from Bang Shift tells a story that's really funny, because the first autocross I did, he was the announcer. And the first time I met Chad, I show up in this 69 Camaro, which at that point, every body panel was a different color. It was
Do you
like
have a picture of that?
I might have a picture of that somewhere.
So every body panel.
Oh yeah, it's like color. All different colors. Some of it's in primer.
There's a project.
Oh yeah, there's no interior in it, just a seat bolted in it.
2 seats or one?
I think it had 2, because we were taking rides.
It had a cruiser.
Oh yeah, it was super fun, and the windshield wasn't dry. Like the windshield got glued in that morning, so it still had windshield tape holding the windshield in, and we were autocrossing it.
Wow.
And Chad's like, this is my guy. He's so crazy that this car is just barely held together with tape, and he's out here racing it. And it was so much fun. Like I had just a blast doing that.
So you watched a Good Guys, and then some, was it the next year or the same year?
I think I watched it in the spring and raced it in the fall.
Okay. Yeah, because there's 2 here in the North Texas area.
Yeah. And I raced the one in the fall, and at that point, I already had purchased the 67 that I have now, that's now morphed itself into the Ultimate Street Car and so on and so on. And I'd always wanted my Camaro back. And I knew I would never be able to afford that one. That's what I thought, and I'd never be able to find it. So I bought another one, which was a 67 RSSS 350, which is what that car is.
It's a real.
Yeah. Which is probably, it had every option.
Enthusiast, hold your ears.
Yeah, it had power windows, rear window defroster.
Power windows.
It had every option.
The option car.
Oh, yeah, it had everything.
Oh, wow.
And I had that car sitting in the warehouse. And it was kind of starting to be built, and I was trying to, the way I work on things, I was building my 69 to flip it, to take the money from the 69 to build the 67. Because the 67 was going to be like my second version of my first car. And I was going to build it to be a driver. Like it was going to have an automatic and a small block and just be like a driver. As soon as I got into autocrossing,
I'm like, that's not going to work. Like, I need to build this car to where it's going to be fast at autocross. I want to have a car that's competitive where if I go to good guys, I could be competitive to win it. And that's when I bought all the Detroit speed stuff for it, and then decided to go LS with a 6-speed. And it was always going to be a twin turbo car.
And what year is this? The 2010, 13, 11, somewhere in there?
Yeah, it's probably in there, 2010 to 2012, somewhere in that region. I'd have to go back. I don't really pay attention to dates very well.
And at that time, from 98 to 2010, that's a long period of time. Dusold Designs has been running and going.
Yeah, and it was slowly morphing from, like, for a while, I was custom painting a Harley every day. Like, we had got it to the point where we had almost like an assembly line, and I would do graphics on almost one bike a day. And we had multiple dealers we were doing Harleys for, and then we also had cars that were coming in and out that we were doing custom paint on as well. So we got to where we had a bigger crew, we're super busy, and then the fab shop at that point was just kind of starting to take off. You know, we were doing more basic stuff back then, but we kind of transitioned in that area more towards the cars and less on the bikes. In that 2005 to 2008 range was kind of like the heyday of bikes. And, you know, where Orange County Choppers was big. Sure. Everybody had to have a chopper. Everybody was wanting to do custom paint. It was like the heyday for it. Yeah. And we were kind of right in the middle of it, doing tons of custom paint. And then that kind of led a lot of people to start wanting to do custom paint. And there became a lot of competition that started to drive the prices down. And it got to the point where I could see the writing on the wall that it just, while I enjoyed it, it wasn't a great business.
Because it's a small platform to paint, so you can't charge a ton.
Well, and there were people that I was trying to compete with, and at this point I have an actual business with overhead and everything else, and I'm trying to compete with people that were like me when I was in my garage with no overhead. Like, they've got material costs, and that's...
Right.
So and people were...
No undercut.
Yeah, and they were just undercutting everybody that had a shop just because they didn't have overhead, and they were just trying to get, you know, side hustle money.
Right.
And it didn't make sense for me to compete with that. Like, if my customers were willing to take a cut in quality to get the cheaper price, then it just showed me that the market wasn't something that I was interested in anymore. So we kind of turned our focus more towards the cars. And the car paint business did really well with that because those people have been kind of a little bit more, I don't know, steady. The car business is a little bit less trendy than the motorcycle business was. And
it's a bigger platform to paint on. There's a lot more that goes into it, tightening up the gaps and stuff. It's not just a tank or a helmet or whatever.
Yeah, there was a lot more to it. And I had been into cars for so long. I mean, I've been into bikes as well, but
right.
I'd been into cars for a long time, and it kind of felt a little bit fresh. And we had a bunch of ideas. And, you know, that era is when we built the real wild cars for Hunter Mahan. Like, we built that twin turbo Nova was in that region. You know, and that car was a really good car, but it also kind of led to, oh, well, maybe we don't want to do these air ride chassis. This thing really doesn't handle the way I want. And we learned a bunch of other lessons with cars like that, in that, you know, back then it's, hey, we're going to build this car around what we want it to look like, and then put the seat in and the pedals in and all that afterwards.
Right.
And now we've learned, no. We put a seat on the build table and pedals on the build table and make a car around it. You know, so the car feels good. But until you learn some of those lessons and what the processes are, you don't know how to get better. And that's where a lot of that learning curve came from, was in that period. You know, that early to late 2000s up to about 2010. And at that point, we kind of did the paradigm shift, and the Dusold Designs as a company kind of adopted motorsports in its DNA.
Right.
You know, it became, this is no longer just a visual company with me that likes engineering stuff. We integrated them, and we started working with different engineers and things like that to work with us that brought knowledge that we didn't have to try to expand it. And then the motorsports was kind of the catalyst to help the company grow, because without a reason and a purpose, what are you doing? So the purpose drove it.
And you start to build some street cred, right? It's like, you know, there's a lot of people out there that are saying, look, you know, I'll build you this, you know, modified classic car, new car, whatever, you know, they'll put all these mods on it and whatever, but, you know, is that person actually putting a lot of seat time into those builds, or has that seat time? And like what you said is that transition of, you know, you started looking at doing the cars, and like the inflection point now is from bikes to bigger builds, phasing that in. But then, oh, by the way, you start picking up the racing, and it's like, okay, so now I can prove the platform.
Well, and I took a kind of a introspective look in that era at, okay, what is the company, and what do I want it to be? What does it do? And the racing kind of just reminded me of, what did Shelby do? What did Ferrari do? What did McLaren do? How did they build their brands, and what were their brands built on? And all of those brands are built on racing. They're all built on taking really, really great teams of people and putting them in an environment to be successful, and then proving it on the racetrack, proving that what your concepts are valid and what you're doing works. And I've been inspired to want to create that same type of thing. And previous to that, the goal of the company was basically Mike centric, right? Like, it's what does Mike know and what can Mike do,
right,
is what the company was. And I was learning a lot about different things, but there's always going to be a limit of what one person can do or understand.
Capacity.
And yeah, I don't really sleep much, and I work a lot, and I still don't have enough time to devote to be able to know everything that I want to know, or have our company be able to do everything that I want it to be able to do. So at that time, it started to become a focus to try to bring in more and more talent around the shop, to have people that are the best in their field. Like our chassis engineer, Scott, is one of the best in the country, and he works with us all the time because the projects are fun. And we work really well together. And our electronics guy, Tim Whitteridge, one of the best in the country. We work with him all the time. We have a great relationship. And building those relationships is what kind of started to catapult us into the next phase of the business, where we're not a person. It's the brand is related to multiple different people, and it's a synthesis of all of these different intellects coming together to build things that otherwise wouldn't be possible. And without all of these different engineers and friends and partners and companies that we work with, none of what we're doing now would be possible. But the motorsports is what was the gravity for that. Without the motorsports at the center of the company, the rest of it wouldn't have come together to form what we've got going on now, which is really exciting, because the stuff that we're doing now is like a rocket ship in technology and what we're going to be able to do.
Right. And so would you say that, like, even on a build, a full build, not a full build, that all of that information that you get from motorsports and Scott as engineers and Tim, you know, that would you say that is kind of infused in almost everything you do
Absolutely.
at the shop now?
Yeah, and it's almost like an addiction for our crew now. Is we've got, the full-time staff, and then we've got the contract staff.
Yeah.
And they both enjoy working with each other because it's been such a cornerstone of the culture at the shop that it's a team. And everyone that comes in is a team member, and everyone is there to help each other and teach each other and grow. And then everybody is really respectful of what everyone's lane is. So we have a lot of specialists in the shop that are very good at a specific thing, and that's what they do daily, but they also go outside of the box and learn from the people around them, which is an inspiration to them because they get to feel ownership of, hey, I have this specialty, I have this part in the project that's mine, but I also get to learn from somebody that is very talented in something that I don't understand, and they're here working with me every day, and if I have a question, they're happy to answer it and happy to help me grow as a person as well. So all of the aspects of the shop are continually growing because we've tried to create a culture for that.
You're really pushing the limits. I mean, if we just take it a step back to the good guys in the autocross, I mean, you're new at that time, just like anyone else that might be coming in.
I got my butt kicked.
Might be watching this, right? I mean, it's like everybody does. And and even if you're going out there not to be, super competitive, but I know that you're a really competitive person. So it's just that motivation factor to move forward. But do you remember back at your first couple autocrosses or even big national events, what you felt like? Did you have any kind of anxiety or anything?
It was super fun because right about, must have been the spring autocross that I did first, or in my Camaro in the 67, because a guy that became a really good friend of mine named Kurt Janisch was out there. I forget who he was racing with at the event, but Kurt was an old school autocrosser local. Every autocrosses in Dallas that's been around for a while knew Kurt. Great guy. And Kurt kind of took me under his wing. It's like, well, if you want to get really good at this autocross, here's what you need to do. And he took me out to, I think I might have done one local, no, it wasn't even a single local event. The first autocross I did locally that wasn't the good guys was the SCCA Pro Solo in Mineral Wells. That was my first autocross, not good guys. And I went out there in a lot of local autocross, and just, technically it's a national event.
Yeah.
So all those guys are like, well, this is your first event? I'm like, yeah.
Trial by fire.
Are you nervous? Like, no. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm in a parking lot with cones. I'm going to knock cones over, or I'm not going to be fast. And either way, I'm going to learn something. And I had a blast, and the car did great. And I think back in those days, there wasn't the cam class. So I had to race street mod, which is a really hard class because you're racing against like all-wheel drive cars on Hoosiers. And I'm in a 67 Camaro on street tires because I'm like, well, if I'm going to race good guys and stuff like that, I need to keep the street tires on it. And I don't care if I get my butt kicked. I'm just going to go out there and pick some car and try and beat that car.
Yeah.
It might not even be in my class. I don't care. And I did that for a couple of years where I just raced street mod locally and got my butt handed to me regularly.
So I think that's a good mindset to go in with. I think some people get kind of worked up and they get a little bit of anxiety on like, there's no way I could jump into an Optima race, even if it came close, or I can't jump into an SCCA Pro race. It's almost like just go, right?
Well, I think the biggest thing is a lot of people don't have the perspective correct, in my opinion. So a lot of people go with the result in mind. Like they go to a race to win the race is the goal. That's not how it actually works. You need to go to the race to have the best race you've ever had as a person. And winning's a result. Winning's a result of preparation. It's not a goal for me ever. Like
Yeah, we said we wanted to win Ultimate Street Car, but daily, when we were going to events, we wanted to perform at a level higher than we performed previously every time. And for years and years, we went out and got beat, and it didn't matter if we learned something about the car, learned something about setup, learned something about driving, and got better. And if you continually get better every time you go to the track, eventually you're just going to start winning. It's just going to happen. And it'll mean a little bit more when you've lost a bunch, and it'll mean a little bit less because if you win a race but you feel like you didn't perform well, you still feel like it was a letdown. You're like, well, I didn't do what I should have done. But it also allows you to see past your competition. And a lot of people say, I want to beat this guy. And okay, well, if you're focused on this guy, it's almost impossible to pass them. You need to focus past them. What are they not doing? How do you get better than them? You know, we did that with my buddy Danny Pop. You know, he was so hard to beat. It took years for me to get around Danny Pop in anything. And he's a great friend of mine. I think the world of him. And I don't know how many times he took me behind the woodshed and I'd shake his hand, tell him congratulations, great job. But one day you're not going to have enough. And I told him that for years.
Right.
And then eventually, I think the first time I actually got around him at an event was at NCM.
Yeah.
And when he knew that,
getting close, he's there.
yeah, it was at that event, he wasn't going to be able to beat me. And it was like, today's the day. I finally, and it was cool because he was, you know, you could tell he was not happy to lose because he's very competitive like I am. So losing isn't necessarily fun, but he felt, I think, happy for me that finally, after all those years, I finally got it done.
Yeah, I'd love to get Danny on the show. And for those that don't know, Danny Pop, Optima Ultimate Street Car and other series that he's running, but specifically in Optima is kind of what you're talking about. You know, he's the guy.
He'll always be the guy. I don't know if anybody will.
He's got the most wins probably, right? Like championship?
He's got the most championships. He won 4 championships and 3 of them he won back to back.
3.
Yeah, he won 3 in a row.
He's the only one to do
I
3.
really wanted to do that. I wanted to go for that record, but unfortunately that wasn't.
How come you couldn't three-peat?
I couldn't three-peat because the Camaro got the ban hammer. But that's
the Camaro got essentially banned from the Optima Ultimate Street Car. I mean, that's kind of like a sharp word.
They say it's
just a
not
rule
banned.
change.
It got banned from the competition for the Cup, for the Ultimate Street Car Trophy. They
created the Outlaw Series for you, right?
Well, not necessarily. For cars like mine and the people that didn't want to do D&E. And I kind of felt like if we couldn't go for the Ultimate Street Car Trophy, I was going to kind of transition the car to the next level and do something more with it.
Yeah, so we basically went from Good Guys, SCCA. Now we're talking about Optima, which Optima Ultimate Street Car is a national series, televised, been around for a while. Started out of the SEMA show.
Yeah, it was a huge deal.
Really cool.
Yeah, I love the series. It's a great series, and
it's the only one like it, right? I mean, just the component piece.
And there was another one that was funny. One of my friends that I was kind of racing with in that early 20-teens. So I told him, I think I want to go win this thing. And he's like, you're nuts. There's no way you can win that.
No way that Classic's winning that.
Yeah, there's no way you can win that with a Camaro. So I was like, challenge accepted.
Do you miss racing with like Danny Pop and Austin Barnes and those kind of early Optima guys that were really
I loved racing with those guys, and that was a glory days for us. I mean, we can create some new stuff going forward, but those days were fantastic. There was just a great camaraderie with most of the people. There was a few people that were kind of pulling against that just took the competition too seriously. But for the most part, a lot of the people were really good friends, really close, and the competition was fierce. Like back in that day, there was 5 people that would show up that could overall an event. and nobody knew who was going to win it. You know, that when you had Ken Thwaites, Rich Wilhoff, Barnes's, Pop, us, you know, there was, and then all the Evos back in the day, like there was stacked competition and so much of it. And it was just fun because you didn't know who was going to win, and you just had so much respect for everyone you were racing with. They were just such good competitors, but they'd give you the shirt off their back. You know, they'd help you fix your car between rounds if it broke.
And that was a period of time also where it's almost like the cars, even the production sports cars that were, you know, economically viable to purchase, were just starting to get tons and tons of horsepower. The geometries were getting right. You know, Chevrolet was doing high performance, you know, the CTSVs, the Camaros, the Corvettes were just getting bigger. But that tried and true early Corvette platform that people were building off of, and then you have your slice of life. But, you know, at that time period, there was a lot of room for growth, you know, whether it's traction controls, twin turbo, this or that. I mean, there was a lot of growth to be had in there, and you were right in the forefront of all that and kind of moving it forward. So that's really the reason why you kind of got banned, you know, or ruled out, I guess you would say, is that your car was within the rules. You just took it, like you've said before, to the next level, because you had to compete against a platform that came right out of the OEM, you know, fairly well balanced. You could do a bunch more to it, put more horsepower into it, but a 67 Camaro, I mean, you've got aero issues, you've got weight issues, you've got geometry and pickup point issues, and you solved it. Yeah, you solved it.
Yeah. Well, it was one of those things that you had to look at it critically, and at the point where I started going crazy with the chassis and everything on the Camaro, Danny was unstoppable. Like nobody could beat Danny. So like I touched on, I said, okay, well, I'm going to look past Danny. What beats Danny? What's faster than what he's got going on? And my solution is the Camaro. Is, okay, well, I need more power, the same weight or less, better suspension geometry, and, you know, I just kind of went down the list. How do you do this? Like, what do you need? Make a list. How do you achieve those things? Do this. And then I built it. And what a lot of people think is that it's a Corvette with a Camaro body on it, and that's really not even close to the truth, because the only thing Corvette in the suspension is the uprights, because the uprights, I found the geometry to be good, and they're cheap and readily available, and they allow you to run tons of brake options. So it was like, okay, well, this makes sense. And then at that time, I hadn't really found Scott yet, so I was doing the chassis design myself, and I did look at Corvette geometry, but I was like, well, the Corvette was designed to be a street car, you know, performance street car, but still a street car, and it didn't really have as much camber gain as I really thought would be good at the lower ride heights. It had, you know, the antis weren't really cranked up as much as you might see on some more aggressive stuff. So I played with that, built the chassis, and it worked pretty good. And then we messed with it, changed the geometry, figured out what that did, and we went through iteration after iteration like that. So over and over and over, that car got stuff cut off, moved, changed, what works. And then once we got to the point where we started working with a friend of mine, Jason Hart, who's a pro driver, he kind of started giving me some advice and talking to me, and he actually introduced me to Scott. And then Scott came in, and between our two championships, between 18 and 19, and it was like the end of 18, he started injecting like pro motorsports steroids into our chassis setup, and it was unreal what the difference was. And I learned stuff about chassis dynamics and how all that stuff works at a accelerated rate like you wouldn't believe. But it took me the previous
3 years of just gaining the vocabulary to even be able to talk to somebody like Scott. Like a normal person that would talk to somebody that's on the level like Scott is, it's like you just don't even have the vocabulary. It's like talking to your doctor when they just use medical terms. You don't even have the vocabulary. You can't talk to them.
Right.
But fortunately, I was able to gain the vocabulary to be able to visualize how everything works, understand what he's saying. And then him and I got a really good rapport because he's crazy off the charts intelligent with how all that stuff works, and he does it all day every day on pro motorsports level. And then I have this weird no box version of thinking of things, and I'll build whatever the hell we want to build.
Right.
He got a kick out of that him and I jam on ideas. He tells me what'll work. I'm like, well, maybe I can make it like this. And he's like, yeah, that'd be cool. And then I'll call him a week later and say, here, it's on the call.
So 2019 was the perfect year to come into your program because, you were basically given the poison pill saying, look, this is your last year.
Yeah.
And
that's when Ken took Ryan too.
And you try to win it.
Yeah. Well, multiple things happened.
But then you have Scott, which is like,
yeah,
he's limited by specs on racing programs. You're not limited on your car, especially in that year.
Yeah, we had no limits.
There's no limits.
Yeah, and Ken Thwaites at that point had recruited my crew chief, who was Ryan, who worked at the shop. And that was like a gut punch at first. It was
like half a step or full step back.
Yeah, and so we just win the championship. And I mean, we just won the championship, and like 2 weeks later that happened. And I found out that at first they were going to ban my car after 18. And then they gave me the stay of execution for 1 year to run it. All that happened. So you have like this super huge high of, I just achieved a goal that's been a goal of mine
November it
happens. It's been a goal of mine for 5+ years that I've been working to achieve this goal. And then we achieve it and boom, the entire world is exploded on us. And it was cool because I'm sitting there and I was kind of like depressed. And it felt weird. Like, why am I depressed? I just achieved all these goals, but all this stuff had gone wrong afterwards. But Pam's like, you know who we need to call? We need to call Patty. So that's where Patty came into our program. And Patty just was a huge injection of talent. And
Patty's your new crew chief.
Yeah, he's been the crew chief ever since then.
Yeah.
2020. He's one of the hardest working guys.
Really, right?
Yeah. And Patty's worked in top alcohol, top fuel.
Yeah.
Like very high level tech. So between Patty, Scott, me, we were all like inspired. Like
the dream team came together.
Yeah, we're like, screw this. We're not letting anybody win an event.
Right.
Like we're gonna go.
I remember that.
We're gonna put the throttle to the stop. And that was probably one of the most rewarding seasons we've ever had. But we were, I know it's going to sound a little bad, but we were unstoppable that year. Like we won everything that year. But had it not had that sequence of events, had Ken not taken Ryan, had my car not got banned, had I not worked with Patty and Scott, would we have achieved what we achieved? Probably not. So all of those things that you could view as like a negative just were like gas on a fire.
Lit the fire.
And the fire burned hot.
And it's burning hot still.
Well, and it was great because what we did there inspired a bunch of the other engineering people and teams to come towards our program because that's where we started doing something that really hadn't been done with vintage cars ever. Like we were injecting things in there that nobody'd ever seen before.
Right.
And it started to make the Camaro like it's a thing now. Like it's not just what it was as the ultimate street car. It kind of grew beyond that, and it turned into this experiment of what is possible with aero and what is possible with, like we have so much time spent on developing just a turbo engine that develops power in all the right places and has reliability that there's
so many thousands of hours of just doing that. And Al, our guy that does our engine analysis, Al at CMP, he has so many hours tweaking cams. Like that thing's probably been through 15 cams just because we do it, test it, see what it does.
So the car at that time was a twin turbo. I think it was Garrett turbos on there. Is it still twin turbo now, or is it just
it's a single now because of the rocket anti-lag?
And you started doing all that because of this iteration coming out of Optima. Yeah, the twin turbo was your preferred setup then, but then you were like, this thing has to build horsepower at elevations and things like that. And so all these engineers, all these programs, and then your program started to blossom on really diving in deep into Pikes Peak. There's not many cars that run that consistently.
No, that's a great event, and it's a great group of people because everybody there has got everything on the line every day for peak week. You know, there's life or death every day when you're there, and there's immeasurable numbers of variables that are going into it, and it's the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life. And Patty and I were talking about this just the other day, where it was Patty's idea to go do Pikes Peak.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And Patty and Tim and Scott all thought, this is a great idea, let's do it. And we did it. We're taking this year off, just so you know.
Yeah.
I needed 1 year to just take a break and reset and go just enjoy the car for a year. But Patty and I were talking about it, and he's like, man, I've never done anything that hard in my life. It's like, it is just absolutely insane because it's so mentally challenging, because a lot of people take for granted, you know, how air pressure and pressure differential and altitude and stuff works, but they really don't know because you haven't actually dealt with it. But when you're doing something that takes every ounce of your cognitive ability and then you start decreasing your cognitive ability through altitude and sleep deprivation, you're making it just nigh on impossible. Like, it's something that you're trying to operate at every ounce you have, but you can't be 100%. It's not possible because you're working on the car till, heck, a lot of times we were working on the car till 10 at night, and then you go to bed and you're up at 2 in the morning.
Right, for practice. And
and then you're off the mountain by night. And you do this every day.
They do that because they have to open the street back up?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you do it every day.
Yeah.
And when you go up on the mountain, the low part's 9,000 feet. So if you're not great with altitude, the start line
is
tough. It's 9,000 feet.
You got to drink a lot of water. You got to reacclimate.
Well, and you can't move around really fast. And you, like for me, anytime we would go like to Glen Cove or up to Devils, which are the next two starting points for the practice sessions, there's times I would be so altitude sick I could barely move, you know, because I just don't do well with that. But I would just be there to try to help, you know, and we have some of the guys that are really good at altitude and they could, you know, handle it. But for me, it was a really big challenge. But it's super rewarding, and it's neat to go against factory teams. You know, like we were going against, hell, last year in practice, we were right next to the Ford's Supervan project.
Right.
You know, and it's wild to be
those are
in that
multi-million-dollar programs or
multi-million
programs. Yeah.
Multi-million.
Yeah.
Like it's
tough
not
to
a common
compete when the dollars get
so
in.
To tell you, Ford rented the mountain like 3 or 4 times.
Oh wow.
For private tests.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're racing against them.
Right.
So it's David and Goliath for sure.
That data's golden on that.
Yeah.
You know, but you could have 2 different climates on the same day.
Oh yeah, it's just a crazy event. It's super rewarding. It's internationally renowned. I mean, it's a great event, and one day we want to go there and feel like we conquered it. You know, we were there 4 times. We had 2 wrecks and bad weather the other 2 years.
Yeah.
So it's like last year we got wrecked out in practice. but it was a perfect weather year. And that just was like a dagger in the heart because the car was the best. The car was the best it's ever been. Had that not happened, I think that could have been a great year because, you know, I wanted to go faster than what Big Red had done. You know, Big Red ran like an 11-minute up there, I think.
Yeah.
And we feel like the Camaro would run a really low 9. And it's there. But we haven't had the chance yet. We haven't been able to get everything to come together. So
Pikes Peak, just a totally different beast. There's not very many people that run it. You're doing a lot of time attack stuff now. Obviously, you're a 2-time Optima champion. Just to kind of look at the Optima real quick, and then let's jump over to, you know, kind of what you're doing with the time attack stuff with Super Let Battle, Grid Life, and all that. You know, when you were running the Optima, was there a favorite track that you ran at Optima, or, you know, in that venue? You know, there's your favorite track, not going 200 miles an hour, but just what you liked at that level of competition.
it was kind of funny because it changed for me. You know, like running at PPIR with Bob Boileau there was always a hoot. Like
That was my first race.
We always had so much fun at PPIR.
That was fun.
The track's not my favorite track by a long shot, but Bob is one of my favorite humans, and he's so much fun. And him being there and being in charge of the track, and he just made it his mission in life to make that a fun event, and he did a fantastic job. It was an unbelievably fun event. And, you know, some of the other ones that we would do every year were always all good, but they all had their own personality. You know, like the NCM events were always fun. It was kind of a lot of heavy hitters from the East Coast were always at the NCM events. It was always really competitive. So those were always a standout that were fun. I always like NOLA because the food's good down there.
Oh, there you go. So that's the thing is about some of these national events. It's not, you know, the racing, the competition, all that's fun, and Optima's very well run, so you know what you're getting. But then it's like you're in these cool spots, and you may not go to NOLA that. Well,
like if you go to NOLA, you got to go to Gattuso's and get some gumbo because theirs is fantastic. And a lot of the tracks were good. Barber was probably one of my early favorite tracks just because that place is beautiful. But we ran a lot of neat tracks with Optima. Road America, I was always like a monkey on my back. I think I was there. I think I was at Road America for 3 events before we actually got laps there. I had massive mechanicals at that place 3 times in a row.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it was just freak stuff. And
I love that track.
I love the track. When I was there this year, I had so much fun, but it was my first time actually making laps there, and it still got me because I went off on the carousel. And
you did got this year at that track. New surface and everything.
The new surface is just slick offline. Hopefully it's better this coming year. Hopefully it's seasoned in and it's not like getting on ice if you get out of the groove.
And that's basically where you've taken yourself is, you know, you drive that car to the edge because you're trying to find where you can enhance things. And like you're talking about is that data, but like at Road America, I mean, it snapped on you because you're taking it to the edge and got out a little bit. But, you know, it was a learning event for you on, you know, where the data and you went 200 miles an hour there or whatever it was.
Well, the dash said 199, but it didn't account for tire growth. So in actuality, we were over 200, but I don't have data that shows it.
Well, what's it like going 200 in a 67 Camaro?
That car, it's bolted to the track. The only thing that's kind of wild is because that car at 200 miles an hour, it's making over 6,000 pounds of downforce.
Wow.
So it pulls the car down on the bump stops. So it's
planted.
Yeah, but you feel that it's planted, but the car just feels so stuck that every time you hit a bump, it can't rebound.
Right.
So it just is jammed to the ground. So it gets like this...
Like a go-kart.
Feel, yeah. Well, think like you're going down the highway, right? And you feel the little... Well, now, triple the speed.
Right. And you're like, what is going on?
Yeah, it's just like... Like
a football field a second.
Yeah, football field a second. That's a lot of little
Right.
seams in the concrete.
That's super awesome. I mean, that's really fast. I mean,
It's wild because it just gives you tunnel vision, really. You know,
the big thing you talk about though with the car and the iteration now. So at Time Attack, is there a track that's like, this is the one I love to try to conquer? Is there a track you're trying to conquer right now?
currently I'm trying to conquer Coda.
Coda.
I've got a goal to try to get to 2 minutes flat or sub 2 minutes, which is really, really fast and super, super hard to do. And currently nobody's done it. There's Rafa Racing has a McLaren. They got down to like a 2:01 or no, it was like a 2 minute flat 0.8 or something like that they got to. So they did that at the Super Lap competition in the spring. So they're currently the quickest, but I think we have the potential to do it. I was really hoping that we were going to be able to do it this spring, but I feel like that's probably too early. You know, we'll be faster, but I don't want to set the goal too high to where we risk doing something stupid.
So people that don't know, Coda is Circuit of the Americas in Austin, F1 track, super fast, got some technical areas to it.
Yeah.
You know, it's just it's an F1 track. So, I mean, you don't get much better.
Although a really bumpy F1 track, which hopefully they fix that because
Really
that
bumpy.
place has got bumpy.
Well, from what you're saying is like you could run over a pebble and feel the bumps with the arrow down.
Well, we have some ideas for some new suspension components that are going to fix that.
I think I know what you're talking about, which
Yeah.
is really cool. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, or do you want to save it?
So we're working on developing a third spring setup that's like so I guess people probably don't know what it is.
talk about
Most
it.
people don't know what the
Super
springs are.
interesting.
So a car with a bunch of aero has a lot of heave load. So heave load is like if you take the whole car and move it up or down. So when you add aero load to a car, it tries to push the whole car down. So what you have to do is either increase the spring rate or have bump rubbers that are of a high rate that support the car once it's carrying that load. So you have this ability to carry the load, but now it's so stiff that the car can't roll. So if you get the roll stiffness of the car too high, it doesn't want to turn. So at low speed, when you don't have the aero pushing the car down and you have this super high roll stiffness, the car feels real skatey and it doesn't like low speed corners. But it's usually worth it to say, well, I'm going to throw away the low speed corners because I need the grip of the high speed corners. That doesn't work for every track, and there's other levels of complexity there. But anyway, in pro motorsports and in a lot of cars, they figured out, well, we can kind of decouple the roll stiffness from the heave stiffness. And the way that they do that is they add an extra shock or a bar with bump rubbers on it that takes that heave load without increasing the stiffness at the corners. So you can make it where it's really stiff and heave, but less stiff and roll. Kind of the opposite of what people normally do with anti-roll bars in a way. But by doing that, you can kind of keep the car up off the ground, get a little bit better performance in the lower speeds, and have more tuning capabilities where you can tune heave versus roll.
Just keeping the car from bottoming out.
Yeah, you keep the car from bottoming out while simultaneously allowing to have a little bit lower roll stiffness.
Yeah, being able to turn it. Yeah, It's super interesting. And that goes back to that, you know, where you're going with your program and the people that you have around you. And, you know, talking about your shop, Dusold Designs, and what you're doing for customers, cars, and things of that nature. And it's like all of that just gets infused. And I think that's what's so cool that sometimes gets lost. It's like, you know, I have this person that does this or can build this, and there's a lot of great shops and things like that. But the level of where you're taking your program and kind of infusing all of that into the build you're doing, you know, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but, you know, even in my car, I know when you were first telling me is, you know, I've gone through this. And so we've put some of the data and what we could, because it was kind of rule based. But, you know, that's what you're doing even with this new Evil Twin project that you have. It's actually your 67 Camaro chassis and all of that technology going into it. So it's really interesting.
Well, that's kind of what we're doing right now. That's really exciting is we've been working on the development of our chassis program and our aero program to the extent that now we're about to come online where that's actually a part people can buy. So there's nothing that really exists in the market today that works at that next level of performance. And we're about to release that to the public where we could say, you could have the whole chassis, you could get a front clip, but our front clip, we have all the aero components that are made to fit it that attach to the car.
Right.
And we know that it works with this body shape, like a first gen Camaro or a Mustang or something. So I thought it would be really cool to develop that to the point where it makes it more achievable and attainable for other people to gain that technology and be able to do those things. Because what I'd like to see is more and more vintage cars and creative builds that incorporate that technology and keep pushing the envelope further forward. Because if we don't keep pushing the envelope further forward, it gets boring and it's stale, and what's the purpose? So we're trying to kind of create that ability for people to just purchase some stuff, incorporate it into their builds, and know that it's been designed to work at that super high level.
Yeah, all the pickup points and everything. And so if I kind of put this all together, is there a potential that type of chassis could actually enter into the Optima Ultimate Street Car? Because that was the initial rule set that's not there anymore, is some of that defined
So we are
language.
talking with them about that. I need to send some more emails back and forth and whatnot, because it's not necessarily a tube chassis. A lot of people look at my car and say it's a tube chassis, and it doesn't necessarily fit that it has to be a tube chassis. It's kind of really no different than what other manufacturers are doing. It's just doing it in a different way. It's taking front subframe design in a completely different direction, and taking rear subframe different direction. And how we tie that all together is a variable, right? Like, you could conceivably put our front subframe in a car with a factory chassis and leaf springs in the back if you wanted. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it, but it's possible.
Right.
So there's a lot of opportunity there to do a lot of different cool creative builds. Like, we're doing a build right now for a guy that's a R35 GTR that's going to incorporate a lot of our chassis components. So that'll lead to some other really cool stuff.
That'll be pretty cool. Yeah. And, the Super Lap Battle, Grid Life, all of that, there's some limitations on what you can do in there, but not as much as like an Optima series. So that's kind of where you're competing now. And you've got a big race program for 2024. Mm-hmm. So you're going to be starting that off when?
Soon. So we've got a lot of the parts for the car have all been sent out so that they can get rebuilt. Motor's getting freshened up, and we're putting a better crank in it so we can turn the boost up higher, which, not that we needed to, but we're going to gain about 200 horsepower this year. And then the trans is getting freshened up, everything's getting freshened up. And we had some experimentation going on with the front aerodynamics, and decided that we wanted to build a completely new design with a completely new concept. We're working with Paul over at Veers on that, and really interesting stuff. So I'm excited to build the new setup, see how that works. There's a bunch of other carbon parts we're going to build that kind of, help make that work even better. And we're going to try and get all that done so that, about a month from now, we're out testing, and then hopefully make a big run at Super Lap Battle.
Super Lap Battle at Coda. Yeah. So that, just to kind of encapsulate everything that you just talked about right there is, your shop now, it went from paint, it went to fab, started racing, went to more fab, body shop. You do a lot of service. You work on, drones, airplanes, safari trucks, classic cars, late models, basically everything and anything. And the thing is that from what I see in there, and you can tell me, is you have a lot of builds going on at the same time. You have 17,000 square feet of shop space, and they're all compartmentalized into your different divisions of body, mechanical, I guess service being the alignment rack and things like that. That grew and is continuing to grow over time. And now you have carbon fiber that you're doing a lot of, and really kind of building your own diffusers, and been selling those for a few years now, but now doing the front aero and working with other companies on, kind of that computer aided design. So it's, you guys are in, the next generation, the next phase of all this, and bringing it all together. It's super cool to see.
Thanks. Yeah, we really just want to push the brand further and further forward and be able to be kind of like a one-stop shop. And eventually I'd like to be able to offer cars similar to my Camaro, but more of a street version and more of a track version that could be whatever somebody wants. And that's kind of been a dream of mine for years, and we're steadily getting closer and closer to it, where, like the Project Evil Twin is kind of number 001 of that concept.
Yeah.
Where somebody comes up and we can offer a turnkey, hey, this is soup to nuts, what you need, here it is. And we can get it done efficiently and quickly, and in a package that's going to actually work, which I'm super proud of that.
So bringing it full circle, we've got the Mighty Mouse as a project down the road. Do you want to talk a little about what it is, or do we want to save it?
I guess I'll save that one.
We'll save it. We'll save it for next time. But Mike, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been awesome. Hopefully, everybody heard a little bit more about you. You're somebody that people have known around the track and the paddocks in multiple series. I mean, you can name any series on the Time Attack side, Optima side, Good Guys. I mean, you've been doing it all for 10, 15 years. Hopefully, we brought a little something out and got to tell your story and really encapsulate what I consider, motorsports history and what we're doing. So thanks for coming out.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, Mike, we wrapped it up, but now it's time for you to hit the sim. We're going to take a couple laps on Road America. That's what everybody does on the show. It's a little different than you expect being in real life, but I think you can handle it. Yeah. We'll see what your time is.
I want to look ahead and I can't. Turn the cameras on and now I crashed twice in a row. I feel like my simulator laps are going to be a giant letdown. But I shouldn't talk that. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Just for one lap. Wouldn't want to bet my actual lap around here is faster than what I could do in a sim. I've got more than a couple laps around this track. Yikes! That wasn't good. It locked up in the brakes. I've had that happen in real life. Yeah, this is not going to be a fast lap. Doesn't feel like a decent time. Ja, snart blir det exit. All right. We call it. I got to land.
Mike just got off the simulator at Road America. Appreciate you guys watching. We went deep with Mike. He went through a lot of cool stuff. We could probably do 2 more shows with Mike. And I'm just super stoked that he came on. Want to thank him again here. But I also want to thank you guys for watching. Whatever streaming platform you're on, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever it is, if you can just go out there, leave a comment, like it, hit the alerts on YouTube. We're going to keep these shows going and we're going to have some good fun. So stay tuned. We'll see you on the next one.